My name's Tiffany. If I haven't met you, super excited that you are here. Welcome to the Young Adults Gathering. How you guys feeling? Feeling good. Thank you. I hear you. Okay, so just want to kind of get a read of the room real quick. Who here is a college student? Let me hear you loud and proud. Fantastic. Who here is in the workforce? Come on. Oh, man. That is awesome. Guys, I was a little nervous. I was thinking, what am I going to do if one of them cheers louder than the other? But workforce was a little louder, I have to admit. But there was a good amount of cheering for both, so that's awesome. Hey, tonight I wanted to start off by asking you a question. Do you remember when you were little, how no matter how old you were, you just couldn't wait for that next thing? You guys know what I'm talking about? Anybody remember this? We're in 2020, the future is now. It's fantastic. But let's just, with me, will you go on memory lane a little bit, right? So when you were really little, do you remember that time when you just could not wait for that next thing? Because whenever you were big enough for this next thing, then life was truly going to be as amazing as you thought it could be. Let me give you a few examples. Who here loves amusement parks? Anybody love amusement parks? Okay, awesome. Any Disney fans in the house? Yeah, amen. I've got a Disney pass. I'm looking for some Disney buddies, so just throwing that out there. Yeah, hit me up. Anyway, and so listen, when I think about amusement parks and being little, didn't you hate that phase when you could go on the kiddie ride, but you couldn't quite get on the other rides? You know what I'm talking about? Those were the really good rides. And so, every time you would go, you'd think, when I am big enough, I'm going to ride the best ride in the park, and life is going to be incredible. You know what I'm talking about? And then that day happened. That day happened when your parents are like, listen, I think you might be tall enough, so let's get in line. So after 3.5 hours of waiting in line, you finally get to that place where the person says, come on, and that you stand right next to the little ruler thing, and they put their hand on your head. I don't know why they have to do that. They can just see, but they do it anyway. And they're like, listen, you're tall enough. And finally, that thing you had hoped for actually came true. And the ride was incredible. Or maybe, I don't know about you, but when you were in upper elementary, for me, when I was in upper elementary, I could not wait to be in middle school. Anybody with me? Anybody excited? Okay, you're like, no, I loved upper elementary. No, I could not wait. I remember that toward the end of my 5th grade year, we had a day in 6th grade. And guys, as a 5th grader, this was the best day of my life because I got to walk around with all of the other 6th graders. And listen, I knew that when summer was over and when I came back as a full-blown middle schooler, I was going to be my own boss because I got to be in charge of my schedule. I went to class and I had a locker. It was going to be unbelievable. And so I could not believe it. And so I got to middle school. And listen, I thought I was going to be my own boss, but I got in detention a lot. So I found out quickly, you're not your own boss in middle school. And so you still have to follow some rules. Or maybe think back to when you were 15 years old. Anybody remember this time? 15 years old. There is only one thing you want in this world. This one thing. I would venture to say you know exactly what I'm talking about because you can, you remember this. When I was 15, I knew that my life would truly start when I turned 16. Because when I was 16, I was going to get something incredible. Tell me what it is. A driver's license. Was anybody else stoked to be 16 and have your own driver's license? Listen, I asked my parents. I got my driver's license, and I was so pumped about it. But guys, this totally was awful. I went with my dad, and the lady came back and said, hey, listen, she passed, but I wouldn't let her loose yet. That's the worst thing you can tell a parent. And so guess what? They didn't let me loose yet, all right? So I remember one of my friends came over, and I was like, Dad, can I take the car? And he's like, no. And I'm like, Dad, what if I just went to the gas station, buy some snacks and then come straight back? And he's like, okay, if you want to do that, that's fine. So me and my friend, we got the radio to just the right spot, right? The jams were bumping. It was awesome. And we drove to the gas station and we drove back. And that was the end of my freedom. It was incredible. But it was amazing to be able to drive. Now I drive anywhere I want. I'm my own boss. It's amazing. But I just remember these times where it's when this happens, life is going to be unbelievable. And, I started to think about my youngest brother. His name is James. He's 23 years old. And he's the youngest of 5 kids. So he's always wanting to like catch up to the rest of us. You know what I'm talking about? Any younger siblings in the house? You know what I'm talking about. You want to do what your siblings do. You want to be where your siblings are. And see, he could not wait for high school. Like he could not wait to be a high school student. And the day finally came where James Lyons was a freshman at Hillcrest High School. And it was an incredible day, and we celebrated. I remember the first few days of him being in high school. I was so happy for him. He finally got that thing he wanted. But then I noticed that he started saying something over and over and over again, and we ended up getting it on video. Take a look at this.
James? Yeah? You're a freshman this year?
Yeah. I'm almost there.
All right, so for those of you who don't speak James, I asked him if he was a freshman, and then he said, yeah. And then he says, I'm almost there. And I was like, where are you almost? And he's like, I'm almost in college. Like he could not wait for college. That was gonna be the thing, the ticket to happiness. And the truth is, much like James, we can do the same thing, can't we? Like, we're almost there. We have that almost there mentality. And we think, if I just get to that next thing, then I will be happy. You know, I'm just so close. I'm just almost there. And we might think that maybe it's that next season of life, or maybe it's that next relationship, or that next job, or that next achievement, or the next season, whatever it might be, then life will be good. But just like James, we can spend our whole life saying, I'm almost there. I'm so close. I'm almost there. But that's just a recipe for disappointment. And if we try to do this, even if we get everything that we ever want, then there's always going to be something else that will prompt us to say, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. I'm so close. And so tonight, what I want to submit for your consideration is that there's not like a destination where you finally get to achieve that happiness and that excitement and that fulfillment that you long for. Because I can definitely, I fall into that trap all the time. I've got to confess, I see other people's lives on Instagram and I think, that is it. Those people have it going on. Come on, I'm not the only person that, you guys ever look at that Instagram and you think, that's what's up. Those people, they've arrived. But the truth is they haven't arrived. If you were to talk to them, they would say, I'm almost there. I have something else on the other side. And so today, what I want to talk about is this idea that there's not a destination to fulfillment and happiness and being okay and being like this sense of like wholeness and okayness that we long for. It's not a destination. In fact, it's really a person. And it's really this whole idea that it's along the way. It's as we go along the way, we can actually find joy and peace and fulfillment and happiness. And if we keep on looking for that thing just ahead, we're going to constantly feel defeated. We're going to feel like we're not satisfied. And we're going to always feel like it's just out of reach. And so today, we're going to look at one of the most iconic passages in the Bible. And if you're new to the whole Jesus thing, if you're new to the whole church thing, most likely, you've even heard about it because it is so famous. I mean, it's on TV. It's on, like, when you see it, like when people give speeches. I mean, people talk about this passage all the time. It is so iconic. And when we think about it, I mean, I grew up in church, so I've got to be honest with you. It's so iconic that, I mean, like, I appreciate it. I like it. Like, I think it's good. It's like giving me comfort at times. But like, as I think about it, for most of my adult life, I've kind of just like slipped into autopilot every time I really start to read it or anytime somebody starts to talk about it because it's so familiar. It's so familiar that I'm like, oh, I've like been there, done that. I know about it. There's nothing more to know. But today, I want to submit for your consideration that there's actually something fresh and new and something that God wants to teach you and me. Because the truth is, a few months ago, I went on this retreat, and one of the things that I was supposed to do is I was supposed to take this passage and not just read it, but like read it over and over and over again, and like give space for God to speak to me. Has anybody ever like been instructed to do that? That's like some high pressure. Like God's gonna speak to me right here, right now. And so I'm like, okay, I mean, I've read this passage like my whole life. Like, I don't know what else he's going to say, but I did it. I went through it, and as I was reading it, I read it, and I said, God, please speak to me, and I gave him the space, and can I tell you that this passage, it came alive in a fresh way, in a way that I really was shocked that it did. And it became like this anthem in my life over the last few months. I've read it like almost every single day, and not because I'm super spiritual, but just because I'm like that desperate for God to do something in my life. And this passage has absolutely rocked my world. And so today, I want to give you something that's fresh that God's given me. And I want to encourage you that when I say what it is, my request for you is this: don't slip into autopilot. Like, don't be like, I've heard it, I know it. But instead, lean in a little bit and say, God, do you have something fresh for me? You know, the Bible is fresh. It's a living word. It's not like this like stale thing that once you read it, you're done with that piece. Every time you open it, it's living and it's active and it can be applied to our life. And so today, I'm excited to share with you Psalm 23. And so we're going to read Psalm 23, and then we're going to dive into what it means. So Psalm 23 starts with this: the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. All right, can I pray before we dive into this? Lord, I come to you right now, and I thank you so much for this iconic psalm. Lord, I thank you so much for Psalm 23. And Lord, I pray right now that you would breathe a fresh life over this familiar passage, Lord. Lord, I pray for every single person in this room. I don't know what their week has been like. I don't know what their day has been like. I don't know what this season has been like. But God, you know exactly what they're dealing with. You know exactly what they are going through. And God, I pray that you would meet them exactly where they're at. I pray that today they would leave knowing that there is a good shepherd who loves them and who has a plan and a purpose for them. And I pray that we would leave feeling secure, not in who we are, but in who you are. In Jesus' name, amen. And so we're going to start with the first line, because that's how you do things. You start with the first line. And the first line is this: the Lord is my shepherd. And I want to stop right there. The Lord is my shepherd. It's this picture of who God is to us. And who here grew up on a sheep farm? Anybody? Okay. Are you serious? Okay, I was like, whoa, bring her up. Okay, listen, I didn't grow up on a sheep farm, but listen, this is this picture of who God is to us. He is our shepherd, and if he is our shepherd, we have to figure out who we are in this situation. If he's our shepherd, then that means that you and I, we're sheep. We're sheep, and at first glance, like, that's awesome, because we're like, you know, cute and cuddly, which is pretty great. And but the thing is, if you've been around church for any amount of time, you've probably heard people talk about sheep. And you've probably heard them talk about how sheep are described as dumb. You know, sheep are described as stinky, as helpless. They can't provide for themselves, and they can't take care of themselves. And to be honest with you, left to their own, sheep are just going to get destroyed if they don't have a shepherd. And so the first thing we have to recognize is this: that sheep actually need a shepherd. And you and I, we need a shepherd. And now, I know that some of you might be thinking, I don't need a shepherd, all right? I've got this. I'm my own man, I'm my own woman. And, you know, as I started thinking about this idea of we've got this, I started to think about some great philosophers of our day. And I started to think about Beyonce and Destiny's Child. And, you know, she says, you know, the shoes on my feet, I bought this. You know, the clothes I'm wearing, I bought this. The rock I'm rocking, I bought this. Because I depend on me. Now, some of you guys don't know what I'm talking about. And for you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you missed a really great time in pop culture. But you can check it out. Check it out on Spotify or anywhere music is played. And it was a great time to live while Destiny's Child was a thing. And the thing is, Beyonce, much like the rest of us, were like, listen, I don't need anybody. I've got this. I'm the one who is like making everything happen. And the truth is, we all by default choose a shepherd. We get to choose our own shepherd. So for some of us, we choose ourselves. We're like, listen, I got this, so I'm my own shepherd. For others of us, maybe we allow like something to be our shepherd or someone to be our shepherd, but we allow somebody else to be our shepherd. But if we do this, like you can totally do that if that's what you want to do, but I have to warn you, if you choose anything else to be your shepherd, then the second part of this verse will not be true for you. And that is this: I shall not want. You see, we all have this thing inside of our souls. We all have this longing for our souls to be satisfied. We all have this desire to be fulfilled, lacking nothing. We all long for peace. We long for acceptance. We long for peace and purpose and love and joy. And the truth is, we long for all of these things. And as we long for all of these things, this is what we're searching for. We're longing for a rich and a satisfying life. And what we end up doing is we keep looking for other shepherds to provide these things. And so maybe for you, your shepherd has been your career, or maybe school or success, and you look to these things to guide you and to lead you and to provide for you, and it give you a sense of security and purpose and meaning. And listen, these things are not evil in and of themselves, but as a shepherd, they're gonna leave you wanting. Or maybe for you, your shepherd is pleasure. So you seek whatever is gonna bring you pleasure. I mean, the driving force in your life is what feels good, that's what I'm gonna do. And whatever brings you pleasure, that's what you're after. And listen, there's a lot of good things that God gives us that is good, like that's awesome for pleasure. Ice cream being one of them, cookies and cream more specifically. And I mean, there's some really, really great things. But the truth is, if that is our shepherd, then it's going to leave us wanting. Maybe for you, your shepherd is relationships. Maybe romantic relationships or maybe just friendships, whatever it might be. But these are good gifts that God wants to give, but they were never designed to be your shepherd. And they're gonna leave us wanting every single time. And the truth is, we all have these wants inside of us. So how can we be truly satisfied? How can we have rest for our souls? It all comes back to this: who's your shepherd? Who's your shepherd tonight? And you know, for some of you, you've chosen Jesus to be your shepherd. You've asked him to be your shepherd. And if you do choose Jesus, he's going to satisfy your soul. He's going to guide you. He's going to fulfill you. He is going to love you and sustain you. He is the good shepherd. But for some of you, Jesus isn't your shepherd. And you're like, you know what? I'm not sure who my shepherd is. I haven't really thought about who my shepherd is, but we all have a shepherd, and we have to figure out, who are we going to call our shepherd? And see, for those of you who have not chosen Jesus to be your shepherd, today could be the day that you stop searching for the soul satisfaction that you are so desperately longing for, because it can be found in the shepherd. And so that's the first thing that we have to recognize with Psalm 23. So often we hear it like said so flippantly. But the truth is, it only really applies if this first thing is in place. It doesn't apply for everybody everywhere. It's only if Jesus is your shepherd, if the Lord is your shepherd. And if he is, I got good news for you. Because in verse 2 it says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He restores my soul. This is such an amazing promise, that he restores my soul. You know, I find myself like overwhelmed with circumstances in life sometimes. Anybody with me? Anybody else feel like overwhelmed? And more times than I'd like to admit, my soul feels heavy, and I feel like I can't catch my breath. And I've had these moments, I've had these days, I've had seasons where I so desperately feel like I need my soul to be restored. And I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's criticism. Maybe somebody has been criticizing you. Maybe you're misunderstood. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Maybe you've screwed up, and the pain of the choice that you made weighs so heavy on your soul. Maybe you're overwhelmed with a diagnosis or anxiety or depression. Whatever it is, we're all desperate for our soul to be restored from time to time. And I remember a few months ago, as I was thinking about this verse, a few months ago, I woke up one day and I had trouble breathing. You know, like it wasn't anything like super serious. Like I just kind of started to notice it, and I went throughout my day, and it wasn't like I couldn't breathe, but I had to like pay extra attention to like get deep breaths. It was like as I was talking to people, I would just keep thinking like, okay, can I take another breath? And nobody knew this was happening. I was just like, this was just like internal because I'm acting like everything's fine and talking to people. And then like I would like just like try to take a deep breath just to see if I could, because like it was just so hard to take those deep breaths. And then at night I would lay down and it was like a pile of bricks were on my chest. And it was so hard to breathe. And it was like 3 days of this and I could not figure out what it was. And I still don't know what it was, to be honest with you. I have no idea what it was. I mean, it could have been that there was a ton of stress in my life at that time. I don't know what it was. I have no idea. But the truth is, all I know is I was desperate to catch my breath. And shortly after this happened, I read Psalm 23, but I read it in the Message version. And if you've never read it in the Message version, you should check it out. It's pretty incredible. But this was incredible. And it says this: true to your word, you let me catch my breath. Isn't that incredible? Like I was dealing with literally not being able to breathe well, and then I read this, and it's like, hey, your good shepherd, true to his word, he's gonna let you catch your breath. And I don't know if you've ever been there. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you're like, man, I don't know why, but I just cannot breathe. I don't know if it's like a physical thing, or maybe it's just like, man, I'm so overwhelmed with my circumstances. But maybe today for somebody, that's all you needed to hear. Like that's the only thing you needed to know, is that you have a shepherd that cares so much about you that he lets you catch your breath. And I love the next part of this verse. It says this: he leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And have you ever said to yourself, I want to do the right thing, I just don't know what the right thing is? Anybody ever been there? Like I have found myself in like seasons and in situations where I'm like, I don't know what the right thing is. Like if I knew what to do, I would do it. But I just don't know what the right thing is. Now, I feel like I have to pause here for a second though. Because some of us, we struggle with what's the right thing, but we never actually read the Bible to hear what the right thing is. And so I need to pause and let you know that there are some things you don't have to wonder about. There are some things that like God has already made it clear, because God is not the author of confusion, but he wants to make it very clear for us. So if you're wondering, hey, I'm in a tough situation, I could lie to get out of it, or I could tell the truth. You don't have to ask God, which one is it? Because he's already said very clearly, tell the truth. If whatever it might be, look at what the Bible has to say about it. And if you're like, I don't know the Bible very well, you know what you could do? Just Google it. And Google is a great way to figure out like, all right, what verse pops up to figure it out. That's just like a little shortcut for you guys I use it all the time. And so we need to make sure and remember that as we try to figure out what's the right thing to do, God is never going to contradict himself. And so if you feel like, man, I feel like maybe God might be saying this, but the Bible says something different, you can know for sure God did not say that. And so just so you know, I'm not talking about those types of things, but there are other areas in our lives where we really want to do the right thing, but we have no idea what it is. We're navigating life and we don't know which decision to make. And I have a lot of these moments. And I was in a season where I was just dreading these conversations that I was going to have because I did not know how to navigate these conversations. Anybody ever been there where you're like, man, I don't know what to say? I called my dad and I'm like, Dad, what should I do? He goes, do the right thing. And I'm like, awesome. I don't know what the right thing is. Like, I have no idea. If I knew what the right thing was, I wouldn't be calling you, okay? Because I would just be doing it. But, I mean, I was overwhelmed with this idea of, like, what in the world? But what I love about this verse is it says that our shepherd is going to lead us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And, as I was dealing with this situation, I came across this verse where Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he came to them and he gave these instructions in Matthew 10:19. He said this: Don't worry about how to respond or what to say. God will give you the right words at the right time. Isn't that pretty awesome? Like, God's going to give you the right words at the right time. And I was encouraged, but honestly, I was like, God, if you could give them to me now instead of like in the moment, that would be preferable. I would way rather that. That way I can go into this conversation, I can go into this decision knowing for sure what to do. But, it kind of gave me this picture. I kind of picture it like this. Have you ever seen a movie where they're like, there's two people, they meet up for a meeting, and one of them has like an earpiece, You know what I'm talking about? And then there's somebody else in like another room who actually knows all the information. And so this person comes to the meeting and they have no idea how to navigate the meeting. They don't know what to say. They don't know they have no idea. And all they're doing is they're listening to the earpiece because somebody else on the other side who actually knows is telling them what to say and how to navigate that conversation. You know, I kind of picture it like that because I'm like, God, you're not going to tell me till right then? Like, what in the world? But then I realized, like, you know what? All I have to worry about is not what to say. All I have to worry about is making sure that my communication line to God is clear and making sure that it's open and that it's constantly going, because the minute it stops, then I'm not going to be able to navigate it. And so whenever I think about what God wants to do when it comes to making the right choice, I believe that if we're in constant communication with our incredible shepherd, he is going to lead us in the right way. He is going to absolutely come through, and you don't have to navigate life by yourself. You know, in verse 4, it says this, "And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Have you ever been scared out of your mind? Anybody? Somebody one time told me, like, "I bet you're super brave." And I had to tell him, like, I'm not brave at all. I get scared pretty easily. And so, like, anything can scare me. And I remember, like, I'm a pastor's kid. And so my dad's church in Missouri, has a really big building. I mean, it was built in the 70s, and like the auditorium alone has it seats like 2,500 people. So it's huge. And so I remember like throughout the day when everybody's there, it was a pretty cool place to be. But then there were times I was there like at night, you know, because you're the pastor's kid, so you're kind of just there every hour that you can be. And I every time, like, to get from one end of the building to the next, the quickest route was always through the auditorium. And so this happened every single time. Like, not just when I was a kid, I have to admit, like when I was a full-blown adult, I would do this too. And so I would walk into this like auditorium. And I know church is like not supposed to be creepy, but let's be real, it was creepy, okay? So I would walk in and it was like pitch black, and like I would step in, and at first I'm like, you know what, this time I'm gonna be brave. Like, I'm giving myself a pep talk. And I'm like, I'm gonna be brave. So I start walking. And then all of a sudden I hear some creaks, and I'm like, and I just kind of pause. And then I like look around and I can't figure out what the noise is. And then I just bolt and I run all the way through because I'm terrified of this just like creepy old building all by myself. You know, whenever we're going through something scary, we don't just walk, do we? Don't we? I mean, we pause. We kind of like have this like paralyzed fear where we're like, I don't know if I can move because this is so scary. We either do that or we bolt and we start running. But nobody has ever been scared and they're just like casually just like walking along. You know what I mean? Like, unless they're trying to impress a girl. Like, there's no way they're doing that. They're running. They're scared to death. And so when I think about this idea of how we all like pick up and run, or we pause, or whatever it might be, until we're safe, why in the world does this verse actually say that, how can we walk? We're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. So how is that possible to walk when you're actually in like the scariest place ever? And I believe that it's because of this, that you are with me. That's that next verse. So how can we have no fear? How can we fear no evil? How can we walk as if we're okay? It's because our shepherd is with us, and his rod and his staff, they comfort us. And because our shepherd is with us, we can walk in security because we're not doing this thing on our own. And his rod and his staff, it's like it represents that he's sovereign and that he's good and that he has a plan. And you see, if Jesus is our shepherd, then we can know that he came and that he defeated death and he defeated the grave, and now we can walk in hope because the most evil thing that could ever come our way, he defeated. And it's overcome, and now we can walk with the shepherd. And then this next part in verse 5 is probably one of my most favorite parts of this entire thing. And it's this: you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Have y'all ever been in a battle? You know, like maybe you felt like you were surrounded by enemies. Maybe you're in the middle of the battle, and when you're in the middle of the battle, like at least for me, what I want Jesus to do is I want him to step in and to pick me up out of the battle so that I can like survive the moment, you know? And I don't know what the battle is for you. Maybe for you, the battle is like the circumstance that you're in that is actually way too big for you to ever handle. Like you're helpless in this situation. I mean, even at your best, you can't affect the outcome of whatever you're dealing with. Or maybe your battle or your enemies that are in front of you, I mean, maybe it's like sickness, or maybe it's anxiety or depression, but either way, you feel helpless and you're surrounded by these enemies. Or maybe for you, it actually really is, like there are people that are out to get you. There are people who are talking smack about you and who are absolutely lying about you and who misunderstand what you're saying all the time. And I mean, like, maybe you have somebody that really is like your enemy. I don't know what your enemy is. I don't know if it's somebody or a situation or something, but we all have been surrounded by enemies in our life. And it's when these moments happen where I want to look to my shepherd who's been so good up until this point, right? To like come in and to save us, to come in and to help us. And so in these moments where I have been like overwhelmed with like, man, there's enemies all around me, God, like please show up. Like I'm expecting him to like give me something good. Like, I want him to, like, end it. I want him to, like, take my enemies out. I want him to stop the battle so that I can have peace and so that I can be okay. And so when I think about this idea of, like, what God is doing in this moment, I kind of picture God like, all right, I'm reaching out to the shepherd. God, what are you going to give me? And I'm hoping that maybe he will give me, like, you know, a bunch of people to help fight with me. That would be awesome, you know? Or maybe he would give me a sword or a gun. I don't know how to use that, but like something, maybe even like a shield to like defend myself. But I find myself in like the middle of these enemies and I'm like, God, please show up. Please help me. And guys, what's incredible is that he doesn't actually give me any of those things that I hoped he would give me. Instead, he does something that like totally is crazy and countercultural. What he does is he takes a tablecloth and he starts to set a table, and he's setting this table, and you're in the middle of battle and you're like, God, what are you doing? You don't set a table in the middle of battle. That's crazy. You know, he puts these glasses on here because he's classy. And then he's really into the charcuterie board type thing. Yeah, amen. And he sets this table up, and this is looking pretty good. And here we go. We got 2 plates, and you know we are going to need some water, so I'll go ahead and pour that. We got some water going on. That's awesome because I'm thirsty. That's perfect. All right. And I mean, listen, we're not savages. We got some napkins here. We got some napkins. And you guys know how to set a table? Have you guys ever set a table? My mom told me how to set a table, so that's how I know how to do this. But listen, in the middle of our battle, this is what God's doing. This is what our good shepherd is doing. He is setting a table. He is getting it all ready. He's ready for us. And so I'm like, God, give me what I need. And he goes, all right, here you go. Right here. Have a seat. I'm with you. I would start to eat this stuff, but then I would be awkwardly chewing. But imagine. And he's sitting here. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Because like I'm in the middle of a battle. Who sets up a table in the middle of a battle? And, you know, I started to think through, like, what is God after? What is he doing? And, you know, it's in the middle of the battle that what he wants to do is he wants to provide peace in it. Because sometimes I'm like, God, if you get me out of it, then I will have peace and I will celebrate your goodness. Get me out of it and then I'll have peace. If I'm out of it, I'll be okay. But if I'm in it, then I'm going to struggle and my life is going to suck and I'm going to just like barely get by waiting for you to save me. But instead what he does is he sets a table and he sits with me in the presence of my enemies, in the presence of anxiety, in the presence of this battle, in the presence of the financial disaster, in the presence of like this sense of like not knowing what to do next. He sets this table. And what he wants us to get tonight is this, that in the middle of the battle, a battle and peace can coexist at the same time. So if you're in the middle of a battle tonight, you don't have to wait until the battle is over for peace to start to happen in your life. Instead, You just need to trust your good shepherd. And he set a table, so sit down. Sit down and just look eye to eye with your shepherd and say, okay, God, man, this stuff is scary. Man, this stuff, I don't know how in the world you're going to ever get me out of it. But because you're here and because you're giving me peace in the moment, I know I'm going to be okay. I know I'm going to get through this. And when I think about how God does this, he actually does this over and over and over again when we look at the Bible. There's a story in Daniel, and it's the story of these three men. And these three men, they were doing all the right things. They were worshiping only the one true God. They were doing everything that God wanted them to do, and they were in the midst of a battle. They were surrounded by their enemies because they were in a foreign land, and this land declared that they needed to bow down to a false god. And they said, nope, not doing it. And so they stood for what was right, and because of that, they had a bunch of enemies who were against them. And these men, their names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And what happened was the king saw that they refused to follow the orders to worship this false king. And so he was so angry, he said, hey, take these three men, and I want you to throw them into a fiery furnace. Guys, this is a crazy thing. Like, you wouldn't be able to watch this on TV because it was going to be so grotesque. Because here he was going to throw these men and let them be burned alive. And this was going to be their punishment for following God. Would you say they were in the midst of a battle? Would you say they're in the midst of surrounded by enemies? That's exactly where they were. And they stood there and they still believed that God could save them. Like, they still believe that God could do something incredible. And if I'm Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and I've got this big faith, and I'm like, nope, I'm still following God. I'm believing that God is a good shepherd. I'm believing that God is going to get me through this. And so I'm like, if I was them, I would start to think of man, I wonder what he's going to do. Like, I bet as soon as they start to throw us into the furnace, then all of a sudden, God's going to just clear out the fire, and it's going to be safe in there. It's going to be good. Or maybe, when they're about to throw us into the furnace, other people get thrown into the furnace, and then we're like, what's up? I told you God was good. I mean, I'm sure they thought God was going to, stop this. Maybe it was going to be one of those, slow motion situations where everybody else paused, but they were quick enough to leave. And they were going to tell, their kids and their grandkids about this time that God saved them from the furnace. But see, God didn't do any of that. Instead, he allowed the king to throw them into the furnace. And as soon as they got into the furnace, when they were in the midst of the fire, in the midst of the battle, in the midst of being surrounded by their enemies, in the furnace, all of a sudden the king looks in and sees not three men, but four men. And he sees them walking around as if the fire doesn't even hurt them. They're walking around. They're not getting burned up. They seem at total peace. And do you know why? Because their good shepherd was with them in the fiery furnace. Because his presence was right there, they were able to have peace because God was in there with them. And then, after the king saw that, he said, bring them back out. And at the very end, he says, hey, these men are actually worshiping the true God. This is an incredible thing. And God's name was proclaimed throughout the nation. Sometimes we're going to be in the midst of our fiery furnace. Sometimes we're going to be in the midst of our battle, and we're going to have to trust that our good shepherd's got us. And because we've trusted him, and because we're walking with this sense of peace, even while things are going on around us, then people are going to start to take notice. And they're going to wonder, what is it about you that makes it okay in the midst of your battle? And you can say, hey, you'll never believe it, but I actually have a shepherd that in the midst of being surrounded by my enemies, he actually set up a table for me, and he sits with me, and I can have peace even in the midst of this battle. And so tonight, I don't know what your battle is. I have no idea what your enemies look like. But can I tell you that Jesus has set up a table, that our shepherd has set up a table for you so that you can have peace that surpasses all understanding. And then I love how this ends. It says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So have you ever felt like you're just so close to satisfaction? Have you ever felt like you're just almost there? Much like my brother James, maybe you've been thinking that peace and satisfaction and joy and purpose and all of these things are going to happen once you get to a destination. But can I tell you that those things are not going to happen once you get to a destination? All you have to do is you have to find your shepherd. You have to claim that Jesus is your shepherd, that he is the good shepherd. You know, I love John 10:11 says this, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And so if you want to navigate your way through 2020, if you want to navigate your way through life, if you want to figure out how you can have peace in the midst of your battle, then can I tell you, all you have to do is declare that Jesus is your shepherd. That's all you have to do. Because he's going to take care of everything. He's going to walk with you. He's going to provide for you. He's going to give you everything you need. And so maybe today, you need to ask Jesus to be that shepherd. And he loved you so much that he died on a cross for you. And he didn't stay dead. He rose again, defeating death and the grave. And now he comes wanting to give you life and life to the fullest. And all you have to do is say yes.